From Anshe Sfard Bethel Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Exodus, its message. If we ask ourselves, what is the message of the story of the Exodus from Egypt, the Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim? Here we're told, we're supposed to tell our children the story of going out of Egypt. But the question is, to what end? What is the purpose of it? What is the major message of it? For these remarks today, I want to thank part of our comments will be from Rabbi Menachem Liebtag, old friend and teacher who recently visited here at the Baron Hirsch Congregation here in Memphis, Tennessee. First of all, you might say, the purpose of the Exodus was to recognize our chosenness. When we said, God chose us from all the nations, well, when did He choose us? What was the act of choosing? Was it with Abraham? Was it Sinai? Was it giving us the land of Israel? When was it? So some suggest that the three pilgrimage festivals, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos, correspond to the three types of choosing that we speak about in our holiday prayers. You chose us. That was Pesach, taking one nation out of another. Ahavta otanu, you loved us, gave us the Torah, the nuptials of the Jewish people. That was Shavuos. And God loved us and desired us. That was Sukkos, a special loving connection that we have on Sukkot. But the question begs the question. The question is, what is the purpose of that choosing? All right, so we answered that. What's the purpose of the Exodus? The choosing. What's the purpose of the choosing? What are we chosen for? We have to continue. Second possibility is that the purpose of Yetziat Mitzrayim is the idea of Hashgacha Pratit, or Hashgacha Klalit, the idea that God is involved in the history of the Jewish people as a whole. Perhaps that has implications for our personal lives in which God is involved as well. God saved us. We were in trouble. God saved us. And that's what the Haggadah says. In every generation there are those who want to wipe us out, those who seek our harm. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us from the grasp of their hands. So that is a second possible message, the idea of God's divine protection to save us from the difficult tribulations of our slavery in Egypt. The third possibility, Rabbi Liebtag emphasized, is that God took us out of Egypt because it is the basis for our ethical behavior. He put us in Egypt and made us experience Egypt. It was prophesied to Abraham that we would be in Egypt because he wanted us to appreciate the downtroddenness and the human suffering of slavery, so we'd act more ethically. All over the Torah it mentions that. We're in the Ten Commandments as it's described in Vayet Hanan, in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, that Shabbos, the whole purpose of Shabbos is to give the rest to your slave so that you will remember that you were a slave in Egypt. We cannot afflict not the stranger in our midst and not the widow and the orphan who are also underprivileged, because we remember we were in Egypt. We cannot take an assurity, we cannot take essential food and clothing items from the widow or the oppressed, because we remember that we were slaves in Egypt. We cannot take all the harvest and not leave the little remains of the small grapes and the things we drop, because we remember that we were slaves in Egypt. We cannot afflict the judgment or the justice for the poor and the widows and the orphans and the strangers, because we remember we were slaves in Egypt. We cannot afflict the stranger, and we even have to love the stranger, love the convert, love those who are from the outside. One more says that hanek tanik lo, that if your slave goes free, you have to give him something. You have to give him a farewell send off so he can be on his own. That too is to remember Egypt. So it's the basis of our ethical behavior. Rabbi Shimshon Pinkus, there was a rabbi first in America, then in Israel. He was the chief rabbi of Ofakim, a city in Israel. He said that the message is something a little more personal. And that is the ichpatiyut, the idea that ichpatlo, that God cares. You see, we say in the Haggadah that Gam et hagoy asher yavodu dan anochi, that God will judge the nation that afflicted us. The 10 plagues were not only to save the Jews, but they were also to judge the nation who afflicted us. And that teaches us that God cares about the ethical behavior of one toward another. That is part of the message of the Seder. Where we see that in the Seder, that there's this ethical message, that there's this the care for others, we see it in Kol Dichvin. We begin the Seder with sort of an empty invitation, but it's a reminder that we are to care about the poor. We invite all those who are hungry to join us, anyone who needs something. This is the time of year where we talk about the Ma'os Chitim. We want to give to those who don't have enough for Pesach. That's our obligation, because Pesach is about remembering the poor. It's about remembering what it means to be downtrodden. But it also goes a step further, and that is just to remember that God cares. Whether it's big Egypt and the big picture of foreign affairs, that God cares what a nation does to another nation, and then also in the more mundane, that God also cares of what I do, what I say, what prayers I make, what investment I make in the study of Torah, what kind of words that I use toward my fellow, what sort of relationship I have with God. God cares about it. The Exodus proves that. It's not only a basis for our ethical behavior, it's a basis for all our behavior. And that's why the 10 Commandments, all 10 of them, begin with Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the God who took you out of Egypt, which shows that I care when a nation oppresses a nation. And therefore, I care that you don't swear falsely. I care that you honor your parents. I care about Shabbat. I care about murder and theft and licentiousness, and I care about telling the truth in court, and I care about not coveting from others. It all stems from going out of Egypt. Pesach is the first step. We don't get into all of it. The first step is to just recognize that simple story, that God saved us from Egypt. But encoded in that is a message for ourselves and our children, even if we don't even recognize it. There is an underlying theme and message that God cares about ethics, God has a relationship with the human being, and that God has a relationship with this world. This, if we can tell the story, and if we can also understand the underlying values and messages of the Exodus itself, we'll be well on our way to understanding and appreciating really an important message of the entire Torah. Thanks for joining us here at the Anshe Sfard Bethel Emeth congregation here in Memphis, Tennessee. Join us each week for a discussion of the Parsha, the various holidays. We wish everyone a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, a happy and kosher and a healthy Pesach to each one of you. Chag Kasher V'Sameach.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit ASBEE.org.